I never imagined a quiet life in Bellefonte, Pennsylvania could hold such dark secrets. For 15 years, I thought I knew everything about my wife, my marriage, and my life. I was an accountant by trade and by nature, a man who noticed details, tracked patterns, and believed in order. Bellefonte is a small town where everyone waves hello, and secrets are meant to be scarce. We were the picture of a steady American couple, a comfortable home on a tree-lined street, modest careers, and routines as familiar as the morning coffee I brewed each day at 6:30 a.m. 15 years of marriage builds a lot of routines. My wife Emily and I married young, and as the years rolled by, I thought we had settled into a peaceful partnership. She worked in the finance department of a local company, a steady job not too different from mine. We often joked that numbers brought us together, two calculators, in love. I treasured our ordinary life. Friday movie nights on the couch, Sunday visits to my mother in nearby Harrisburg, annual summer drives to the Jersey Shore. It was a life of comfortable patterns, or so I believed. One crisp autumn evening, that comforting pattern shattered. We were finishing dinner, a quiet Wednesday night at home. The kitchen smelled of the marinara sauce I'd made from scratch, the scent mingling with the burnt orange leaves visible through the window. I remember Emily was a bit distracted that night, stirring her pasta absently. I was talking about an interesting anomaly I'd found in a client's ledger that day. Something about a misplaced decimal causing thousands of dollars to vanish and then reappear. Accounting thrills, as I often teased her. She usually humored me, offering a smile or a question. That night, though, her mind was elsewhere. And it turned out the intern just typed one extra zero, I said, chuckling as I twirled spaghetti on my fork. Simple mistakes can cause big problems. Emily looked up as if surfacing from a daydream. She gave a quick automatic laugh. Right, like forgetting to carry the one, she replied half-heartedly. Then she pushed her plate away slightly and said, Honestly, Brian, that's on you. You should double-check their work more carefully. My fork stopped mid-air. A strand of spaghetti slipped off and splattered back onto my plate, speckling red sauce on the white tablecloth. The name hung in the air between us, Brian. My name is Mark. For a second, I wondered if I misheard. The room was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. Emily's eyes widened, and I watched the color drain from her face as her own words registered in her mind. She opened her mouth slightly, as if to speak, but no sound came out. Her throat bobbed in a hard swallow. Who's Brian? I asked softly, breaking the brittle silence. Her fingers trembled as she reached for her glass of water. She took a long sip. I could hear the faint clink of ice against glass, buying herself a moment. I'm sorry, she stammered, avoiding my gaze. I was thinking about work, about my coworker Brian. He messed up a budget report today, and I guess it was stuck in my head. I didn't mean to say his name, Mark. She tried to smile, but it faltered quickly under my steady stare. My heart thudded once, heavy and deep, then seemed to freeze in my chest. Her coworker, Brian. I knew of him. She'd mentioned to Brian now and then over the years, always in passing. He was one of the senior managers in her finance department. We had never met properly, but I had no reason to think twice about him. Until now. I wanted to ask 100 questions at once. Why would she mention him now? Why call me by his name? Each question flashed in my mind like red neon danger signs, but I kept my face carefully neutral. An unexpected calmness settled over me, a survival instinct perhaps, like my mind flipped a switch from confusion and hurt to analysis mode. Years of auditing books and tracing errors had trained me well. When something doesn't add up, you don't panic. You methodically gather data. It's okay, I lied quietly, forcing a slight smile as I dabbed the marinara stain on the tablecloth with my napkin. My voice sounded distant to my own ears, but even. Long day, huh? I guess we both have a work on our minds. I saw her shoulders loosen just a little. She thought the danger had passed. She let out a soft, nervous laugh. Yeah, sorry, long day. Lots of numbers swimming in my brain. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Her palm was clammy. Let me clear the dishes, okay? You cooked, so I'll clean. I nodded and released her hand. I watched as she hurriedly collected the plates and took them to the sink. Her back was turned to me, and for a moment she braced herself against the counter, her head bowed. She looked upset, frustrated. I couldn't tell. I only caught a glimpse before she straightened and busied herself with the water and soap. My own reflection stared back at me from the darkened glass of the patio door across the room. I looked calm. The face of a man finishing dinner on a normal night. But under the table, my hands were balled into fists. Inside, a storm was raging. Brian. She said it so naturally, like second nature. There was familiarity in the slip, something intimate. You don't just accidentally call your husband by a coworker's name after 15 years of marriage, not without a reason. As I rose from the table quietly, retrieving the stained tablecloth to put in the laundry, my mind raced but in a controlled way it does when reconciling an account that's off by a few cents. I was connecting threads, reviewing data from memory. Brian from work, senior manager in her department, probably close to her age, maybe slightly older. Mentioned occasionally over the years, I recalled she said once, Brian from marketing taught me a new Excel trick today. Or, Brian and I have to work late next week for end-of-quarter reports. Always casual, nothing that raised alarm by itself. Did I ever see them together? Once, maybe 2 years ago, at her company's Christmas party. A tall man with a firm handshake and a polite smile. That must have been Brian. He chatted with us briefly about how he and Emily were tackling some budget issue. I remembered how he'd looked at her, but at the time I'd chalked it up to professional respect. Now that memory replayed with a new, sinister filter. Did I miss something in his eyes? In hers? I tossed the crumpled napkin into the trash, trying to recall every mention of Brian. Each detail I recalled felt like another piece of a puzzle I didn't know I was assembling. When Emily got a promotion 5 years ago, she credited her hard work and a supportive team. She specifically mentioned Brian's guidance made her a better analyst. There were a few evening work calls she took behind closed doors. She said it was just Brian panicking about numbers. Business trips. She'd gone on more of them in the last decade. Not frequent, but once or twice a year. Chicago, Dallas, LA, always for some conference or training. I never questioned them. Did Brian go on those trips too? She usually traveled with colleagues. It was possible. A knot twisted in my gut, 10 years. The number jumped out in my mind and I wasn't sure why. Something about this situation. I had an awful hunch, an intuition, that this wasn't a recent development. Could it be that this slip of the tongue was revealing not just a flirtation, but something far more extensive? As I joined her by the sink, handing over the last plate, I carefully said, "So was today really tough? You seem a little out of it. Anything you want to talk about?" She didn't meet my eyes as she scrubbed the plate. "No, nothing really. Just the usual year-end crunch. You know how it is." Her tone was light, maybe a bit too light. Brian and the others were writing everyone to wrap up the quarterly forecast revisions. She glanced at me and managed a weak smile. "I guess I just have work on the brain. Sorry again for, the name thing." I shrugged as if it truly didn't bother me. My acting was decent, honed by years of polite small talk with clients even when I was upset. Don't worry about it. In college, I once called my roommate by my professor's name after pulling an all-nighter. Could happen to anyone. She let out a more genuine laugh at that, a hint of relief in it. "Oh God, that must have been awkward." "Yeah," I said, forcing a chuckle. I gently placed a hand on her back, a familiar gesture, and leaned in to kiss her cheek. "I'll go finish up some work in the study. Take your time here." "Okay, hun," she said softly. This time her voice had warmth, the easy affection that had been there for years. It almost made me doubt my suspicions. Almost. I walked out of the kitchen, calm strides, as if nothing were amiss. But once I was in my study down the hall, I closed the door quietly and sank into the leather chair at my desk. My hands were shaking now that she couldn't see me. I laced my fingers together and pressed them against my mouth, staring blankly at the spreadsheet still pulled up on my computer screen from earlier. The numbers blurred and swam. In that moment, I felt two things simultaneously. A deep, piercing pain, and a strange clarity. The pain was obvious, just the thought, the mere possibility that Emily, my wife, my partner of a decade and a half, had betrayed me in the most profound way sent a rush of nausea through me. But the clarity was something new, something cold that cut through the emotion. It was as if I'd been unknowingly working on a math problem for years and now finally saw an error in the equation. If there was an error, I needed to find it, prove it, correct it. That's what I do. That's what I've always done. Sitting there in the silent cocoon of my study, I made a decision. I wouldn't jump to conclusions on a single slip. I would gather information like evidence for an audit. I would be methodical, patient, and thorough. If my marriage had a hidden flaw, I would uncover it piece by piece. I took a deep breath and opened a blank notebook that lay on my desk. As an accountant, I still loved keeping some things on paper. Numbers, dates, facts. I wrote down Brian. Emily said his name by mistake. Why? History? 5+ years? 10 years? Check. Travel dates coincide with his, phone, emails, odd behaviors, late work nights, etc. My hand was steady now, the pen gliding in neat, firm strokes. A plan was taking shape in raw outline form, born from that sudden clarity. I didn't know what I would find, not yet, but I knew where to start, quietly, carefully, and with a cool head. From the kitchen, I heard the water shut off and a cabinet door close. I closed the notebook and slipped it into a drawer, then pulled my open laptop closer. I clicked mindlessly through a spreadsheet as if reviewing it, just in case she peeked in. A minute later, Emily appeared at my study door, drying her hands on a dish towel. She gave me a small, hesitant smile. All clean. I'm gonna go take a shower and then maybe read in bed, okay? Sure, hun. I'll be in later, I replied, returning the smile as naturally as I could manage. She lingered a moment, leaning on the door frame. Her eyes scanned my face, perhaps looking for any sign of hurt or suspicion. I kept my expression gentle, maybe just a touch tired. Finally, she simply said, I love you, Mark. I love you too, I responded, perhaps too quickly, but it seemed to satisfy her. She left, patting down the hall to the bedroom. I swiveled my chair and looked out the window into the darkness of our backyard once I was alone again. The reflection in the glass was just me, now frowning, jaw clenched. Outside, the wind had picked up, rustling the fallen leaves across the yard in a little swirling eddies. I love you too, I whispered to no one, repeating my own words in a bitter murmur. How automatically I'd said it. How trustingly. My stomach turned and I closed my eyes. 15 years of marriage. Was it all a lie? Or perhaps not all, but tainted by a lie for a long time. I tried to recall when I first heard of Brian. It might have been around 10 years ago, give or take. The timeline of our entire marriage suddenly needed re-examining. The idea that an affair, if it was an affair, could have been going on for a decade right under my nose made my blood run cold. The coldness steadied me, oddly. If true, that would mean that while we were building our life, sharing our everyday joys and sorrows, there was a hidden parallel life running alongside, well concealed. A second set of books, so to speak, masking the reality. As an accountant, I knew how double-entry bookkeeping can hide deceit if you're clever. Was my wife maintaining two sets of books in our marriage? One for me, the honest ledger of our daily life, and another hidden ledger filled with her secrets. I opened my eyes and stared hard at the faint reflection of myself. There was hurt there, and anger too, but behind them, a steely glint was hardening. If she thought she could dupe me indefinitely, she was mistaken. No one knows numbers and hidden patterns better than a meticulous accountant. And if Emily had been balancing two lives, I would methodically unbalance them. I would find the truth, every ugly decimal of it. That night, the house settled into its familiar nighttime rhythm. The gentle creak of the floorboards as Emily moved about in our bedroom, the muffled rush of the shower, the quiet click when she turned off the bathroom light. Eventually, the soft murmur of the TV in our bedroom told me she was watching one of her favorite late-night shows. Our life looked the same from the outside. I maintained my faade, going about my routine as though nothing had changed. I brushed my teeth, slipped into bed beside her. She kissed my cheek and we exchanged goodnights. If there was tension lingering, we both pretended not to notice it. But as I lay in the darkness, listening to her breathing even out into sleep, I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing through what I would do starting the next day. The shock of hearing another man's name from her lips had jolted me awake to a reality I never thought I'd face. There was no going back to the comfortable ignorance of before. Now there was only one path: uncover the truth. And if the truth was as ugly as I suspected, I already felt something growing in me. Something colder and more calculating than any spreadsheet. In that moment, I made a silent promise to myself. If she has betrayed me, I will not confront her in a burst of anger. I will not throw things or scream or beg. No, I will do what I do best. I will think, I will plan. And when I have everything I need, I will act with precision. Lying there in the dark, I felt as though I had stepped outside myself, watching the life of that trusting husband slip away. In his place, a new persona was taking shape. Patient, methodical, quietly furious. Beside me, Emily murmured something in her sleep and turned over. I remained on my back, eyes open. It was going to be a long night, the first of many, but that was fine. I had a feeling I wouldn't be getting much sleep in the days to come. The shock had come and gone, and now a careful hunt for the truth had begun. Gathering evidence. The next morning, I woke up early as usual, having barely slept. Emily was still asleep beside me, curled on her side. I slipped out of bed carefully, leaving her undisturbed. In the bathroom mirror, I barely recognized myself. Deep shadows sat under my eyes and my jaw was set in a hard line. I took a long, cool shower, letting the water and a plan for the day clear the haze of exhaustion from my mind. Over black coffee in the kitchen, I scrawled a quick list on a yellow notepad. Items to discreetly check. Phone records. Bank and credit card statements. House search. Anything unusual? Observe Emily's routine. Brian's background. I tore off the sheet, folded it, and tucked it into my wallet. Steps to follow, evidence to gather. By the time Emily came into the kitchen, dressed for work in a navy blouse and pencil skirt, I had breakfast ready, scrambled eggs, and toast. It was something I did often, but today, I had an ulterior motive. Keep her feeling secure, off guard. I greeted her with a warm smile and a plate of eggs, hiding the roil of emotions under a practiced calm. "Morning, hun," I said cheerfully. "Made your favorite." She looked pleasantly surprised. "Oh, wow, thank you." She offered me a quick kiss on the cheek and sat down. There was a hint of uncertainty in her eyes. She was likely wondering if I'd truly brushed off last night's slip or if I was secretly upset. I'd have to put that worry to rest for now. I poured her a cup of coffee. "Sleep well?" I asked, sitting across from her. Well enough," she replied, adding a spoon of sugar to her mug. "I feel bad about last night. I was so distracted I called you the wrong name. You know I know who my husband is." She tried to smile playfully, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. I chuckled, lightly, waving it off. "I know, it happens. Honestly, I pretty much forgot about it until you mentioned it again." Lie. I took a sip of coffee, then ventured casually, "So this coworker of yours, Brian, you said he messed up a report?" She hesitated almost imperceptibly, her fork halfway to her mouth. Yeah. He's our senior financial manager. He's been kind of scatterbrained lately, honestly." She resumed eating, eyes on her plate. "He mixed up some figures and I had to help fix it. That's probably why his name was on my mind." I nodded as if mildly interested. "You've mentioned him before, I think. Isn't he the one who was at your Christmas party? Tall guy in the gray suit?" She looked up and I saw a flicker of caution in her expression. "Yes, that's him. You have a good memory." "Hard to forget. He was practically the only person I met that night besides your boss. We talked about hockey, I think. Flyers versus Penguins." Her shoulders relaxed a little. The conversation seemed harmless enough. "That's right. He's a huge Flyers fan." We continued to chat benignly. I let her steer the topic to safer waters, an annoying software update at her office, the weather forecast. All the while, I observed her closely. She was a bit more talkative than usual, almost rambling about minor things. Nervous, I thought. Does she suspect that I suspect? Or is she feeling guilty and trying to cover it with chatter? After breakfast, we parted ways as always, a brief hug and a peck on the lips by the front door. "Have a good day, babe," she said, slinging her purse over her shoulder. "You too, Em. Don't work too hard," I replied. I watched from the doorway as she pulled out of the driveway in her sedan, heading off to work at the usual time. She looked as she always did, composed, professional, put together. It struck me how normal everything appeared on the outside. It was hard to reconcile that image with the rotten seed of doubt now firmly lodged in my mind. Once her car turned the corner out of sight, I closed the door and immediately set to work. Normally, I'd be leaving for my office around now, but luckily I had a flexible schedule this week due to a gap between big projects. I had already decided to take the morning off. If this crisis blew over as a misunderstanding, so be it. I could spare a personal day. If not, this was more important than any client ledger. First order of business, phone records. We shared a family cellular plan. As the resident numbers guy, I managed most of our bills, and I had the login credentials for the phone account saved on my laptop. With a few clicks, I was looking at the call and text logs for Emily's phone number. My pulse thudded as I filtered recent calls. I told myself to stay calm and systematic. There it was. Brian's name appeared multiple times. She had his number saved in our contacts list, which is why the log showed his name. Some calls were during work hours. That could be legitimate work communication. But a few stood out. A call on a Saturday evening 2 weeks ago, a call on another night at 11 p.m. last month, and plenty of calls around 6 or 7 p.m. on weeknights, usually short calls or missed ones. She often had excuses to work late or would claim she was stuck in traffic around those times. My jaw tightened as I scrolled further back. The logs from previous months showed a clear pattern. Calls to or from Brian multiple times a week, often at odd hours beyond a typical coworker chat. Many were brief, likely just quick check-ins. Some were longer. There were also quite a few text messages. Though I couldn't read their content here, I could see their frequency and timestamps. A flurry of texts at 10 p.m. on a Sunday night a month ago. More texts midday on a Saturday in another instance. Work colleagues rarely need to text at those times unless they're friends. Or more. This evidence alone wasn't a conclusive proof of infidelity, but it was highly suspicious. My heart ached as I tallied the frequency. It spoke of a familiarity, a constant communication far beyond my interactions with any colleague. We had been paying the phone bill every month, and I'd never bothered to examine the details closely. Why would I? I trusted her. That trust had made me blind. I took screenshots of the call and text logs with Brian's entries highlighted, then printed them on our home printer for a tangible record. The printer whirred quietly in the otherwise silent house, spitting out page after page of betrayal in neat rows of date, time, and duration. I swallowed hard and forced myself to the next task. Bank and credit card statements. Being the family accountant, I had digital access to all our joint accounts and most of her individual ones. The ones she'd shared with me, at least. We each had a personal credit card for gifts and personal expenses, but even those statements we often glanced over together for budgeting. She must have hidden anything big on those, or so I figured. But maybe there were clues. I downloaded the last 2 years of statements for her personal credit card and our joint card as well, printing those out too. Then I sat at the dining table, files spread before me, a pencil in hand like I was reconciling a client's books. Line by line, I went through each charge, marking anything I didn't recognize or that seemed odd. Some things were obvious. Purchases at local grocery stores, gas stations, her favorite clothing boutique downtown, normal. But a few made me pause. Hotel charges. One from the Marriott in Chicago the year before, in July. I remembered she went to a week-long training then. It wouldn't be odd, except I noted a second charge on her card from a fancy local restaurant in Chicago that same week, a place far pricier than her per diem would cover. She'd told me the company paid all her travel expenses, including meals. So why was she paying $180 at an upscale steakhouse on her own card? For two people, perhaps? A charge at an upscale jewelry store, $450, about 3 years ago, in December, around Christmas. But I never received any $450 piece of jewelry from her. My gifts that year were a leather briefcase, which I still use, and a sweater, both nice but not jewelry. Did she buy something for me and then decide against giving it? Unlikely. If it was jewelry at that price, she would have given it. Did she buy something for someone else? Or was it something she received? The statement only shows the purchase. If it was for herself, she never mentioned it. Numerous restaurant charges in nearby towns that I didn't recognize. We dine out together maybe once a week, often at our favorite spots. But here I saw charges from eateries we never frequent. Cozy little bistros or cafes in neighboring towns, often around lunchtime or early evenings. One pattern caught my eye. About 2 years ago, nearly every Friday, there was a charge at Lakeside Grill, a restaurant by the state park about a half-hour drive away. I'd never been there. She never mentioned going. If it was a work group lunch, wouldn't she have told me about it at least once? Each anomaly by itself might have an innocent explanation, but taken together, the conclusion was inescapable. For years, possibly 10 years, Emily had been siphoning time and resources to someone else, almost certainly Brian, and I had been oblivious. I leaned back in the chair and closed my eyes, feeling a wave of anguish wash over me. The hurt was like a physical ache in my chest. It was one thing to suspect. It was another to see it in black and white on bank statements and call logs. The affair was real, not just a paranoid fantasy. It had a paper trail. My mind flashed back over our marriage. The nights she came home a bit late and shrugged it off as last-minute meetings. The weekends she said she was going out with a girlfriend. The business trips. How many of those were lies or half-truths? How many times had I kissed her goodbye, trusting, not knowing she was going to him? I pushed the thoughts back and forced my eyes open. Stay focused. There would be time to grieve later, to rage or cry or whatever might come. Right now, I needed to be thorough. I continued with my list. Next, search the house for anything unusual. I started in the bedroom. Our bedroom. The sanctum of our marriage, now potentially a crime scene of sorts, where evidence of deceit might be hidden in plain sight. I methodically went through her drawers and closet. It felt invasive and wrong, but I reminded myself that the betrayal, if true, was a far greater invasion. In her sock drawer, I found nothing but socks and a few photos of us from years ago. In her nightstand, the usual collection of half-read novels, moisturizer, and miscellaneous items like nail files and hair ties. Then I checked under the bed, feeling around in the dark space where we sometimes shoved boxes. My hand brushed against something small and I pulled it out, a black velvet ring box. My breath caught. It was the kind typically from a jeweler, the kind that holds something expensive. Opening it, I found a delicate gold necklace with a small ruby pendant. I recognized it immediately. It was beautiful, and I had never seen it before. Certainly not a gift from me. I recalled the jewelry store charge I'd seen from 3 Decembers ago. $450. A necklace with a ruby could well cost around that. So she did buy jewelry. Not for me, but for herself? Or was it from him for her? Perhaps he gave her money, or she bought it as a cover for a gift he gave. Either way, she'd kept it hidden. I felt a surge of anger as I clicked the box shut. Had she worn this for him? On those business trips or nights out, did she dress up in things I never saw to impress another man? I reminded myself to breathe. I tucked the box back exactly where I'd found it. I didn't want her to notice it missing. Not yet. Next, I carefully felt along the inside pockets of some of her jackets and purses that hung in the closet. In one rarely used handbag, I discovered a folded receipt. A hotel in Pittsburgh, dated April of last year. We didn't go to Pittsburgh together, ever. Her company had no office there as far as I knew. My hands shook slightly as I unfolded it. It was a credit card slip for a 2-night stay at a downtown Pittsburgh hotel, mid-April, with her signature. It listed 2 guests. 2 guests. I pressed the receipt flat on the dresser and snapped a photo of it with my phone, then gently returned it to the handbag exactly as I found it. She'd never mentioned this trip. The date coincided with a time she claimed she was going to visit her sister in New York for a long weekend. I remember because I had been swamped with work and couldn't get away, and she said she hadn't seen her sister in months and was taking the chance. She even called me from New York one night, describing a new restaurant in Brooklyn they tried. All lies, delivered smoothly. That memory made my skin crawl. If she was in Pittsburgh with him, then she called me and pretended to be at her sister's in another state. The level of deception was astounding. She had sounded so casual on that call, telling me about a boutique she visited in Manhattan. None of it was real. I sat on the edge of the bed for a moment, the weight of it all pressing down. 10 years. A tapestry of lies woven into our life. I wondered if she ever felt guilt or if she could compartmentalize so well that being with me felt just as real to her as being with him. Did she love him? Did she love me? Perhaps both? Perhaps neither truly, only herself? The questions threatened to overwhelm me. I ran a hand through my hair. There was one more obvious avenue to check. Her personal devices. Her phone and her computer. But her phone was with her at work, and her work laptop too. She had a personal laptop we kept in the living room cabinet, mostly used for browsing and personal emails. I pulled it out and opened it on the coffee table. Her login screen appeared. We had shared passwords for years for most things. Early in our marriage, we'd had a policy of transparency. Unless she'd changed it recently, her laptop password was likely still our anniversary date or her childhood pet's name. I tried the anniversary, 062510, June 25th, 2010, the day we got married. Denied. I tried her pet's name. Buster. Denied. One more. Emily 1010. Denied. I paused, biting the inside of my cheek. If she had changed her password, that itself was interesting. She hadn't told me. After so many years of secrecy, maybe she had multiple digital locks I wasn't aware of. I had to be careful not to trigger a lockout or an alert by guessing. I closed the laptop for now. That path would require more finesse, perhaps a password recovery tool later or a keylogger. I made a note to consider it, but it wasn't my top priority yet. I'd already collected a trove of damning evidence by midday. It was beyond suspicious now. It was essentially confirmed. My wife was having an affair and not a brief fling or one-time mistake, but a calculated, sustained second life spanning years. Standing alone in our living room, evidence strewn across the coffee table and dining table, I let the reality sink in fully. A mix of devastation and anger washed over me, a feeling like ice cracking under pressure. But beneath that, fueling me, was a steadiness. I had asked for the truth, and now I was getting it. Yet even in that moment of heartbreak, a dark part of me was already moving past discovery and into strategy. Knowing hurt, but it also empowered. Knowledge is power, after all. I gathered up the printed pages, photographs, and photocopied receipts and placed them in a plain manila folder. Then I locked that folder in the bottom drawer of my home office file cabinet. It was labeled innocuously as 2023 tax docs, something no one would disturb. I checked the time. It was almost noon. My stomach was growling faintly. I had been so absorbed I forgot to eat anything since breakfast. But I had one more task in mind before I could consider lunch. I wanted to see them, if possible. Not confront, just observe. The idea of physically seeing my wife and this man interact, knowing what I now knew, churned my gut, but I needed a sense of their daily pattern. Emily usually took lunch around 12:30 p.m., often at a small cafe near her office, or sometimes she'd bring something to eat at her desk. If Brian was her lover and so closely intertwined with her, chances are they might spend lunch together, perhaps under the guise of a work meeting or just two coworkers grabbing a bite. I decided to go see for myself. Our town of Bellefonte is small, but her company was actually in the neighboring city of State College, about a 15-minute drive. It's busier, home to the university and a number of businesses. She worked at a firm called Keystone Financial Services in an office park on the east side of town. I had been there a few times for her office events or to pick her up, so I knew the area. I got in my car and headed out, that manila folder of evidence safely locked away. During the drive, I felt oddly calm, like I was heading to a routine appointment. Perhaps my mind was protecting me, or perhaps the accountant in me was fully in control now that the evidence was found. Step by step, I was proceeding down the list. I parked across the street from Keystone Financial around 12:15, in a lot by a strip mall where I had a clear line of sight to the front of her building without being too conspicuous. The midday sun was bright, and I donned a pair of sunglasses and a baseball cap I'd brought to make myself less noticeable. It felt strange, almost silly, to be doing this cloak and dagger routine, but I reminded myself it was necessary. For a while, I saw nothing but employees coming and going, some walking to their cars, others strolling down the street to grab lunch. At 12:40, I saw her. Emily stepped out of the glass front doors of the building. My breath caught. Even from a distance, I recognized the navy blouse and the way she brushed a strand of hair behind her ear as she paused to wait. A moment later, a man emerged to join her, tall, lean, with sandy brown hair. He wore a crisp white shirt and tie, no jacket. Even without seeing his face clearly, I knew. Brian. He smiled at her, and they fell into step side by side, heading down the sidewalk, away from where I was parked. They looked casual, normal, just two colleagues out for lunch. But as they walked, I saw him lightly place his hand on her lower back for a moment as he guided her around a slow-walking group. She tilted her head toward him in response, smiling at something he said. The familiarity in that gesture was intimate, even if fleeting. I felt a hot bolt of jealousy and anger strike through me at that small touch. It took all my restraint not to leap out of the car and confront them right there. But I stayed frozen, watching. They turned the corner at the end of the block, out of sight, likely heading to one of the nearby eateries. I got out of the car then, trailing at a distance. My heart hammered in my chest. I kept telling myself I was just observing, not to let emotion take over. But seeing them together made the betrayal painfully real in a way that even the papers hadn't. They went into a sandwich shop, a local deli that was popular for quick lunches. I entered a minute after, pretending to look at the menu near the door, while keeping them in my peripheral vision. Emily and Brian sat at a small table by the window. They already had their sandwiches and drinks likely grabbed quickly from the counter. They were talking, and I could see Emily laughing at something. She looked relaxed, leaning in slightly. Brian reached across at one point and briefly touched her hand as he spoke, making a point with a smile. She didn't pull away. I couldn't hear them over the clatter of the deli and chatter of other patrons, but I could see enough. In public, they might have been just friendly coworkers, maybe a touch flirtatious. Even I might have thought that if I stumbled in unwittingly. But given what I knew, every casual touch and shared laugh felt like a slap to my face. I had sat across from her at countless meals with that same smile directed at me. Now she gave it to him openly, as if it were nothing. A bitter thought came. How many times had they done this? Had lunch right under everyone's noses, assuming no one would be the wiser? To anyone else in that deli, they probably looked like a normal pair taking a break from the office. Even I could have mistaken it for that once, but now I saw the subtle signs. The way her foot, I noticed, hooked around his under the table briefly, the way he looked at her with an intensity beyond casual. God, did any of their colleagues suspect, or had they fooled everyone? I ordered a soda just to have a reason to be there, then left the deli, my stomach too knotted to actually eat. I returned to my car and waited. About half an hour later, they came out. To my surprise, they didn't head straight back to the office. Instead, they walked toward the parking lot. I slunk down in my seat. Brian led her to a car, a black BMW, and opened the passenger door for her. She got in, and he rounded to the driver's side. I felt my breathing quicken. Were they leaving together? For what? A lunchtime rendezvous? Perhaps they had an hour or more for lunch, enough to slip away if he drove fast. I gave them a bit of a head start, then started my car and followed at a safe distance, careful not to be obvious. The BMW wound through the streets and headed toward a more secluded area, a nearby park known for its quiet trails. On a weekday, especially midday, it wouldn't be too crowded. My grip on the steering wheel was so tight my knuckles were white. Sure enough, they pulled into Greenbrier Park, and I coasted in after, hanging back. The park had a lot of trees, a small lake, and parking spots dotted along a loop road. Brian's car stopped at one of the more isolated spots under a grove of maples. I parked further down, partially obscured by some brush, but I could still see their vehicle. The BMW's engine shut off, but neither of them stepped out to enjoy the scenic lake. A few minutes passed. My mind conjured images of what might be happening inside that car, and I had to fight a wave of nausea and fury. I considered walking by to catch them in the act, but I stayed put. I did not want a face-to-face confrontation, not yet. Emotionally, I wasn't ready. Strategically, it wasn't time. After what felt like an eternity, in reality maybe 15 minutes, the car started up again. It reversed out of the spot and drove back toward the exit. I sank low as they passed by me. Through the windshield, I could see them both. Emily's hair was a bit mussed and Brian's tie was loosened. Her lipstick looked smudged. She was holding up a compact mirror, touching up her makeup, likely to hide evidence of kisses. My stomach lurched. They were gone before I could dwell on it further, presumably heading back to work. I waited a few minutes, then drove out of the park myself, heart pounding. They had definitely been doing more than eating lunch. That midday escapade, brief as it was, confirmed beyond any doubt what was going on. Back in town, I parked again near her office. I saw Emily getting out of the BMW a block down. She adjusted her blouse and smoothed her hair before walking briskly back toward Keystone Financial. Brian didn't park right by the building. He must have dropped her and then went to find his own spot, or maybe he had a bit more leeway with time. I watched as she disappeared through the doors, composure apparently intact. Just another lunch break as far as anyone at work knew. I realized I was shaking. Time to go. I'd seen enough. On the drive home, a tempest of emotions roiled inside me. Fury, hurt, disgust, even a sick sense of humiliation, though no one else knew yet. The image of her reapplying lipstick after leaving that park burned in my mind like a brand. How dare she? How dare they? When I got home, I paced the living room to burn off some of the adrenaline. I wanted to scream or punch a wall, but I forced myself to remain outwardly composed. Cold and controlled, I reminded myself. That was my strength now. I poured all that emotion into determination. I took my notebook out again and started a fresh page for conclusions. Affair confirmed. Emotional and physical. Duration. Likely long-term. Evidence of Twexo or 10 years. Wife's lover, Brian C. co-worker, possibly also married, need to verify. Secrecy maintained via lies about work and trips, separate phone communication. Next steps, don't reveal knowledge. Gather more info on Brian. Plan confrontation, or plan something else. At that last thought, I paused. Confrontation. If I confronted her now, what would happen? She might confess or she might lie more. She'd certainly be on guard. The affair would likely stop temporarily or go further underground. Brian would be alerted, and they would cover their tracks. No, confronting now was too simple, too kind. Also, the raw hurt inside me wasn't seeking a simple apology or even just a divorce. It wanted justice, perhaps even revenge. 10 years they had stolen from me. 10 years of deceit while I lived honestly by her side. That wasn't something I could forgive or walk away from calmly. The fact she could lie so easily, live a lie for so long, revealed a side of her I never knew. A cold, selfish side. Well, I could be cold too. My mind started sketching something darker. I didn't want just to catch them, I wanted to make them pay. I wanted to ensure their betrayal cost them dearly. This wasn't just about ending the marriage. It was about making sure the consequences were dire and lasting. I wrote the word consequences in heavy block letters on the page and underlined it twice. Ideas swirled in my mind. Expose them publicly. Destroy their reputations. Maybe even find a way to put them behind bars. It was a cold, ruthless plan, and it felt right. Reading that word, I realized I was planning a campaign, not just a confrontation. A strategy to systematically dismantle their lives as they had dismantled my trust in marriage. It was a cold, ruthless concept, and it felt strangely right. They had acted in secret for a decade, thinking I was a fool. Now I would use secrecy and cunning to turn the tables. I wouldn't be violent or overtly cruel. I would simply let the truth and a few strategic lies do the work. For a fleeting moment, I considered the moral aspect. Was I going too far? Should I just gather evidence to confront them, then divorce and move on? That might be the sensible route for many. But as I thought of that long list of lies and the years lost, my resolve hardened. They had been criminally selfish. Perhaps it was time they truly faced criminal consequences. I realized I needed more information on Brian, especially if I were to expand this to legal or career consequences for him. What did I know? Senior manager, likely mid-40s, married, probably. Did he have kids? Was he respected at work? Any rumors about him? I also needed to know if their affair had broken any company policies or laws. Many companies fire employees for affairs if it breaches conduct codes, especially if one is a superior. If he was above her in the hierarchy, that might be a violation to report. And if they claimed business expenses for personal liaisons, like that Chicago trip or Pittsburgh weekend disguised as work, that could be serious trouble for them. The accountant in me saw another angle. What if I could uncover financial wrongdoing? People who cheat on spouses might cheat in other ways. If Brian was misreporting finances or using company funds improperly, I could potentially find it or frame it. Emily might have unknowingly given me hints. Her mention of him messing up a report or being scatterbrained. Maybe he had other issues. If I could find, or fabricate, evidence of him embezzling or committing fraud, it would kill two birds with one stone, ruin his career and possibly lead to legal action, loss of freedom, and indirectly implicate her by association or if she helped cover for him. It was a long shot, but I had to explore it. My stomach growled again, reminding me of the time. It was past 2 p.m. I made a quick sandwich in the kitchen and ate mechanically, hardly tasting it as I continued to scribble ideas and strategies. By the time I finished my late lunch, I had a rough blueprint in mind. It was an ambitious plan, and I'd have to adapt as I learned more. But I felt a grim sense of purpose ignite within me. They had made a fool of me for far too long. Now it was my turn to outwit them. My thoughts were interrupted that evening by Emily's voice. I was at my home office desk working, while she paged through a magazine on the couch. "Mark, you okay? You've been staring at that spreadsheet for like 10 minutes." I snapped out of my reverie. It was Sunday, just a few days after the initial discovery. I was ostensibly catching up on some office work. I hadn't even realized I drifted off into planning while a budget projection sat untouched on my screen. I turned to look at her in the doorway and forced a sheepish smile. "Yeah, sorry. Got lost in numbers. End of quarter stuff is a drag." She smiled. "Tell me about it. I can't wait for this quarter to close. It's been hectic at work too." "Bet it has," I said evenly, then turned back to my screen to avoid further conversation. In truth, every casual interaction with her had become painful. Acting normal felt like walking on hot coals while trying not to wince. But I managed, for the sake of the plan. By the end of that week, I had prepared the groundwork. Letter to HR. I drafted an anonymous email to Keystone Financial's HR department and CC'd the company's CFO for good measure, detailing an undisclosed long-term affair between a senior manager, Brian Caldwell, and a subordinate, Emily, my wife. I included specific allegations that they had misused company resources for personal trips. I listed the Chicago conference in July 2018 and the Pittsburgh training in April 2023, among others, with dates and suspicious details. The tone of the email was formal and concerned, as if from a whistleblower within the company who was outraged by the ethical violations. I made sure to mention I had evidence and that others knew but were afraid to speak up. I wanted the higher-ups to feel they must act swiftly and not brush it under the rug. Package for Brian's wife, Laura. I gathered copies of key evidence, the phone logs highlighting late-night calls from Brian's number, printouts of receipts, the Pittsburgh hotel receipt showing 2 guests, the Chicago hotel and dinner, etc., and even a couple of the photos I'd taken at the park. Grainy, but you could make out Emily, and likely Brian in the car. I wrote an accompanying letter, anonymous but truthful in perspective. I explained that I was someone whose spouse was having a long-term affair with her husband, and I thought she deserved to know. I kept the tone measured, not vindictive, more like a concerned stranger. I included an email address I'd created just for this purpose, in case she wanted to contact me for more information, though I planned not to reveal my identity until much later, if ever. Divorce papers ready. With the help of an attorney I had quietly consulted, under the guise of a hypothetical, I prepared a divorce complaint citing adultery. Pennsylvania is a no-fault divorce state generally, but fault can influence things like alimony. We drafted it anyway to put pressure on her. I also prepared a separation agreement that was heavily in my favor. I would keep the house. It was in my name before marriage, my retirement and savings, and she'd keep her car and whatever personal savings she had. No alimony, given her fault. Essentially, she'd walk away with very little. The attorney, Andrew Fletcher, had advised me that given the evidence of adultery and her likely ruined income prospects after the fallout, she might sign just to avoid a protracted fight. We held the papers unsigned and unfiled, waiting for the right moment to serve her. Financial safeguards. I quietly opened a new individual bank account and moved half of our joint savings into it. Not enough for her to notice immediately. I fudged a note about a short-term investment in case she looked, but enough that I had control of a good chunk of funds. I also rerouted my paycheck to deposit into my personal account. I wanted to be sure that when the hammer dropped, she couldn't clean out our accounts or stick me with joint bills. All that remained was to choose day 0 for when I'd put the plan into motion. I decided on a Wednesday in late October. Midweek, less expected than a Friday. Also, I knew, from Emily's calendar, that her department head would be in the office that day. If HR acted on my tip, they'd have the necessary people present to respond immediately. And Brian's wife, Laura, typically worked from home on Wednesdays. I'd gleaned that from her Facebook posts mentioning remote work midweek, so she'd likely be home to receive the package or at least see it in her mail. In the days leading up to Wednesday, I was on a knife's edge of anticipation and anxiety. I went through the motions of normal life with Emily, dinners, TV, polite chatter, while inside I was steeling myself for the coup de grace. Bliss. On Tuesday night, I could barely sleep. Lying next to her, listening to her breathe, knowing that by the next night, she might not even be sleeping under the same roof. It was a strange, hollow feeling. I didn't feel guilt exactly. She had brought this on herself, but There was a somberness to it, like the quiet before a storm that would level a town. Wednesday morning dawned crisp and clear. I woke up feeling electric with adrenaline. It took a great effort to keep my expression and demeanor normal. Over breakfast, Emily was a bit quiet, absorbed in her phone, likely scanning work emails. I studied her face, the face I had loved for so long, and reminded myself of all the deceit hidden behind that familiar smile. There was a slight crease of stress on her brow. She had no idea how much worse her day was about to get. Before she left for work, she mentioned casually, "Don't forget, we have that dinner with the neighbors on Friday." "Right, Friday," I said with a polite smile, sipping my coffee. Inside, I thought, by Friday, everything will be different. As she left for work at 8 a.m., she gave me a quick kiss and the usual, "Love you, have a good day." I mustered a soft smile. "You too, Em. Love you." The last time I would ever say those words to her, I knew. She walked to her car and I watched from the doorway as she drove off. My heart was pounding, but I felt steady, resolute. The moment her car disappeared, I closed the door and allowed my expression to harden. Showtime. I immediately went to my computer and hit send on the pre-written email to Keystone's HR and executives. In a matter of seconds, my carefully crafted bombshell was on its way to the powers that be at her company. Next, I took the prepared envelope for Laura Caldwell and got into my own car. I had decided not to trust this to regular mail timing. I wanted it in her mailbox that morning. Her address wasn't far. Brian and Laura lived in a nice subdivision on the other side of State College. To avoid drawing attention, I dressed in gym clothes to appear like a jogger. I parked a couple blocks away and jogged into their neighborhood, the envelope tucked under my arm like a magazine. Their house was a well-kept two-story with a blue door. As I trotted past, I slipped the envelope into their mailbox and kept moving without pause, heart hammering. The whole drop probably looked innocent to any onlooker, just a morning jogger mailing something. That done, I returned to my car. It was only 8:30 a.m. I sat behind the wheel and took a few deep breaths. I realized my hands were trembling slightly from adrenaline. Piece by piece, the dominoes were set to fall. The final step was the divorce papers. I had arranged for a process server to serve Emily at home that afternoon. I chose home, rather than her workplace for a couple reasons. First, I wanted her to experience the work fallout without the context of knowing I was behind it. If she got served at work right away, she'd instantly know I knew everything, and might guess I was the HR whistleblower too. I wanted her confused and off balance at work. Second, I selfishly wanted to see her reaction when she was served. I planned to be present for that. My attorney, Fletcher, had a server on standby to meet me around midday. Now all there was to do was wait for the chaos to unfold. I spent the next couple hours pacing the house, too antsy to sit. I peeked occasionally at my email for any bounce back or reply from the HR tip. None, which I expected. They'd likely keep it internal. Around 10:15 a.m., I felt a rush of nervous energy. By now, someone at Keystone must have read the email. Perhaps HR was quietly verifying some details or pulling records. I imagined Brian getting a call to HR, or maybe they'd confront them at once. I checked the time compulsively. Late that morning, I got a panicked phone call from Emily. She was in tears, practically incoherent as she babbled that she and Brian had been accused of misconduct at work and put on administrative leave pending an investigation. I feigned shock and concern, urging her to come home so we could figure it out. She agreed, sobbing that she'd be home in 15 minutes. I heard her car screech into the driveway. I quickly sat on the living room couch, arranging my face into a worried mask. My heart was thudding in my chest in anticipation of what was to come. The front door flew open and Emily rushed in, eyes red and wild, face tear-stained, looking frantic and disoriented. Seeing her like that, part of me, some old reflex, wanted to comfort her. But I strangled that impulse. She dropped her purse and keys on the floor and came straight to me. "Mark!" she sobbed, collapsing onto the couch beside me. She grabbed at my hands desperately. "I don't know what's happening. They think I did something awful. It's like someone set us up." "Us," she said, "us." So she knew that Brian was equally in trouble. Even now, she was grouping herself with him. Using us to me. Interesting. I kept my expression confused and concerned. "What did they accuse you of?" I asked gently. She wiped at her eyes with shaking hands. They said they have evidence I falsified expenses and violated ethics rules with a relationship at work. Her voice cracked on that last part. She searched my face as if trying to gauge what I knew. I made my eyes go wide in apparent surprise. A relationship? They think you and who, Brian? I said his name as if it were almost ridiculous. She let go of my hands and buried her face in her palms. It's ridiculous, Mark. Brian and I are just friends, colleagues. Yes, we traveled for work together a couple times and we'd have dinner. Maybe the company thought that was unprofessional. I don't know who would twist it like this. Some enemy of his, maybe, trying to take him down by dragging me into it. Even now, faced with disaster, she was in full damage control mode, spinning lies desperately. If I didn't know the truth, I might have actually believed her trembling, teary performance. But I did know, and watching her continue to lie so smoothly both infuriated and sickened me. I maintained my facade of confusion. That's unbelievable, I said, putting an arm around her shoulders as if to console. Did they say who accused you, or what evidence they have? She leaned into me, sobbing. No, just that it was reported anonymously. They mentioned the Chicago trip and Pittsburgh, and, oh God, Mark, those were legitimate trips, I swear. Who would say it was something else? She was clinging to my shirt, a look of desperation in her eyes. They took my laptop and work phone. They said an investigation is underway and that Brian and I are on leave until it's over. It's a nightmare. I rubbed her back like I was soothing her, even as my gut churned with anger at her continued deceit. There must be some mistake, I murmured. If you didn't do anything wrong, it will clear up, right? She nodded frantically, latching onto my words. Right, right. It's just a mistake. But who would do this? Who would lie about me? About us? Again that word, us. She was so upset she wasn't even trying to hide her togetherness with him in her language now. Before I could answer, the doorbell rang. She jolted in my arms, nerves shot. Who's that? She asked, alarmed. I stood. I'll get it. Through the sidelight window, I saw a man in a suit, our process server. Perfect timing. I opened the door. The man gave a professional half-smile. Mark Turner? Yes, I said. He held out an envelope. I have a legal delivery for Emily Turner. Emily had stood up and inched toward the door, her face etched with confusion. I'm Emily Turner, she said softly. The server turned to her and gently pressed the envelope into her hand. Ma'am, you've been served. And with that, he pivoted and left, closing the door behind him. For a second, Emily just stared at the envelope as if it were a live grenade. She looked at me, bewildered. Her fingers fumbled it open and pulled out the sheaf of divorce papers. I watched her eyes scan the first page. Complaint for divorce. Then her gaze snagged on a word and her mouth fell open. Adultery. Her head snapped up and she gaped at me. Mark, what? Her voice was a choked whisper. She looked back at the papers as if to ensure she read right. Adultery? You think I... She stopped, perhaps finally seeing the ice-cold expression on my face. The mask completely dropped. I let silence answer her. The seconds stretched, her shock morphing slowly into dawning realization. I answered at last, my voice quiet but firm. I don't think, Emily. I know. She stared at me, lips trembling. No, it's not. You don't understand. Sit down, I said, a sudden harshness in my tone that made her flinch. I wasn't yelling, but there was steel underneath the words. Now. She obeyed numbly, collapsing onto the couch, the divorce papers clutched in her hands. Tears started spilling from her eyes again, but now they were tears of panic and guilt rather than self-pity. Mark, please, let me explain, she began. I felt a surge of grim satisfaction. Here was the real moment of truth. I picked up the manila folder from the coffee table, the one filled with all the evidence I'd gathered, and dropped it onto her lap. It landed with a heavy thud. Explain then, I said coldly. Explain these. With trembling fingers, she opened the folder. On top lay the printed phone logs with Brian's name all over them, and beneath that, the hotel receipts, photos, copies of emails between her and Brian that I had pulled from her personal account. A comprehensive catalog of her betrayal. She flipped through them in horror. Her face went ashen as a realization set in that I had everything. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out except a strangled noise. How? she finally croaked. When? I answered in a monotone. That night you called me by his name. That's when it started. Then I found the truth. All of it, Emily. 10 years, isn't it? 10 years you've been with him, lying to me every day. She shook her head wildly, tears flying. I can't. Mark, I never meant— Don't, I snapped, cutting her off. My control was slipping. Anger seeped into my voice. Don't you dare say you never meant to hurt me. You carried on with him for a decade behind my back. Every time you slept with me, every time you kissed me goodnight, you knew what you were doing. Don't stand there and tell me you never meant— She dissolved into sobs, covering her face with her hands. I'm sorry, she wailed. I'm so sorry. I never wanted to leave you. You wanted the comfort of a husband and the thrills of a lover. Is that it? I hissed. And you thought I'd never find out. Well, guess what? I did. And now it's over for you. For both of you. She looked up at me, suddenly sliding off the couch and onto her knees on the carpet. It was an almost unconscious motion, as if her whole body was collapsing under the weight of my words. Mark, please, she begged, clasping her hands together. Her tear-streaked face was a mask of misery. I'm begging you. I'll sign anything you want. I'll take nothing in the divorce. Just don't destroy me completely. I pulled my leg away as she tried to grasp at my pant leg, and I stepped back, looming over her. My voice was icily calm. Should have thought of that before sleeping with a coworker and committing fraud to cover it up. She let out a wail and doubled over, sobbing into her hands. Please, I know I was wrong. I was horrible, but please, Mark, don't do this. I crossed my arms, looking down at her. The pity I might have felt once was buried under layers of hurt and anger. You ruined our marriage, I said flatly. You don't get to cry and ask for mercy now. She looked up, desperation mixing with defensiveness in her eyes. It wasn't all my fault, she blurted through her sobs. You were always working, always so distant. I was lonely, Mark. Brian made me feel alive. I'm not saying it was right, but I cut her off with an upraised hand, a snarl in my voice. Spare me the justifications. If I was so terrible, you could have divorced me. I glared at her. Instead, you kept me in the dark and had your fun on the side. You don't get to play victim here. Any problems in our marriage pale next to what you've done. She crumpled, the brief flicker of blame-shifting extinguished by shame. I was a coward, she sobbed. I didn't want to hurt you. I wanted both. I was selfish. I'm sorry. Her apology meant nothing to me now. Yes, you were selfish. And now it's over. You've lost me. You've lost your job. You might even lose your freedom if the company presses charges for all those phony expenses. I paused to let that sink in. Her eyes widened in pure terror. As for Brian, I continued mercilessly, he's losing everything too. His wife knows. By tonight, she'll have all that evidence, just like you do. By tomorrow, everyone will know. Your coworkers, your friends, our neighbors, your parents. I made sure of that. You're both going to be infamous for this. She stared at me as if I were a stranger, horror and heartbreak mingling on her face. Oh my God, she whispered. What have you done? What have I done? I echoed with a bitter laugh. No, Emily. This is all on you. I'm just holding up a mirror. You chose this. For 10 years, you chose this. I'm just making sure the consequences finally catch up to you. She suddenly lunged forward on her knees and grabbed at my hands again, crying hysterically. Mark, please, please, I'll do anything. We can fix this. Go to counseling. Start fresh. Anything. Don't do this. I'm begging you. Don't ruin my life. Don't send me to jail, please. I yanked my hands free and stepped back, shaking my head in disbelief at her audacity. She would promise the moon right now, but only because she'd been caught. You ruined our lives, I said quietly. Now I'm just making sure you can't hurt me anymore. The rest you brought on yourself. She slumped back onto her heels, a desolate cry escaping her lips. She looked around almost manically at the papers scattered on the floor, the evidence of her betrayal laid bare. Her eyes landed on a framed photo knocked askew on the coffee table. A picture of us on our 10th anniversary, smiling with arms around each other. She picked it up with trembling hands and stared at it, tears splashing the glass. The sight might have broken my heart once. Now it felt like a distant scene, almost unreal. Her phone, discarded on the couch amid the chaos, began to vibrate and ring. We both glanced at it. Brian's name flashed on the screen. A red haze of fury enveloped me. I snatched the phone up. Emily's eyes went wide and she reached out. No! I hit the answer and put it on speaker. I didn't say anything, just listened. Emily? Emily? Brian's voice came through, tinny and frantic. Thank God, are you there? My wife, she knows, she's going ballistic. And HR, they fired me, I think. They made me hand over everything. What the hell is happening? Who did this to us? I stared at Emily as I replied, voice icy calm. Who did this? Hi, Brian. This is Mark, Emily's husband. I did this. You did this. Enjoy the hell you've earned. There was a sharp intake of breath on his end. Mark, I hung up mid-sentence and immediately powered her phone off. I tossed it onto the couch. Emily was shaking her head, mouth agape. You talked to him, she whimpered, as if only now truly understanding how thoroughly I had unraveled their world. I glared down at her, this quivering, broken woman I once loved. Yes, I said simply, and it's the last time either of you will ever speak to me. From here on out, you can communicate through the lawyers. She collapsed forward, sobbing uncontrollably. Her spirit seemed to break entirely in that moment. For a split second, I felt a pang of something. Pity, sorrow. But I steeled myself. I had to. I turned and walked out of the living room, leaving her kneeling amidst the wreckage. I headed upstairs to our bedroom, no, my bedroom now, and grabbed a suitcase from the closet. I couldn't stay here. Not tonight. Possibly not ever again in this house of lies. I threw clothes and essentials into the bag haphazardly. I took the important documents from my desk and the remaining evidence folder. Not that I'd need it now, but I didn't want her to destroy it. I took my laptop. On the dresser was a small wooden box containing our wedding bands. Emily had a habit of taking hers off to do dishes and often left it lying around, so I'd put the box there to keep them safe. Her ring was inside. She wasn't wearing it. I realized she hadn't put it on this morning. Perhaps in the rush of her crisis, she forgot. Or maybe she stopped wearing it at work some time ago. I removed my own wedding band from my finger. It had dug a groove into my skin after so many years. I dropped both rings into the box. Lugging my suitcase downstairs, I paused in the foyer. Emily was still on the living room floor, crumpled and weeping. She had the photo of us clutched to her chest like a lifeline. The divorce papers lay strewn around her like fallen leaves. The manila folder's contents were spilled out across the rug. She looked up as I approached, her eyes swollen and lost. Where are you going? She managed between sobs. Away, I said simply. I'll be staying somewhere else. Don't try to contact me except through my lawyer. I think we've said all we need to say. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but nothing came out except a broken keening sound. I turned away, opened the front door, and stepped out into the chilly afternoon. The air felt different, sharper, cleaner. My heart was pounding, but I also felt a strange sense of relief washing over me. It was done. After months of harboring secrets and schemes, everything was finally out in the open, laid bare and scorched by daylight. I loaded my suitcase into the trunk of my car. As I got into the driver's seat, I sat for a moment, hands on the wheel, taking stock of myself. I felt exhausted. And yet I could breathe, truly breathe. Inside the house, I could still faintly hear Emily's cries. I pulled out of the driveway and drove away without looking back. In that moment, it struck me. I was free. The life I thought I had, the life she had poisoned with her deceit, was over. But my life, my own life, was still ahead of me, and I intended to live it on my terms, free of lies. Epilogue. New beginnings. 6 months later, I was living a very different life. On a warm summer evening at the coast, I walked hand in hand with a new love, feeling hopeful about the future. In the aftermath of the revelations, my world had been upended, but ultimately it changed for the better. The divorce went through swiftly and quietly. True to her word that desperate day, Emily didn't contest a thing. She signed the papers, and aside from a brief, hollow apology delivered via her lawyer, we had no direct contact after that confrontation. Legally and financially, I came out nearly whole. I kept the house, I sold it soon after. I wanted a fresh start without ghosts in the walls, my savings and retirement accounts, and my car. Emily walked away with her personal belongings, a small savings account, and little else. Given what came next for her, money was the least of her worries. In the months that followed, both Emily and Brian faced the fallout of their actions in full. Their affair had not only cost them their marriages and careers, but also led to legal consequences. The company's audit unearthed their false expense reports. To avoid a trial, they both pleaded guilty to fraud. Brian, as the instigator, served a short jail stint. Emily got probation and fines. Both were left with criminal records and had to repay every misused dollar, leaving them financially wrecked. Neither of them could find work in finance again. Brian's wife divorced him immediately. Emily, shunned and unemployable, moved back in with her parents. Unsurprisingly, their illicit romance crumbled under the weight of disgrace and mutual blame. They turned on each other and split up, each left to face the wreckage alone. And me? I moved on. I left Bellefonte not long after everything settled. Found a new job in a different city, a place where I wasn't that poor guy whose wife cheated. I wanted anonymity and a clean slate. In time, I even found someone new. I eventually met Jessica, an architect with a warm smile and a kind heart. From the first, her honesty and empathy disarmed me. When I cautiously shared the story of my past with her, she listened without judgment, offering only understanding and comfort. Slowly but surely, I learned to trust again. Jessica showed me that love built on honesty could heal the wounds of betrayal. Day by day, the scars that Emily left have faded, replaced by hope for the future. Looking out at the horizon, I realize how far I've come. I lost a false love built on deceit, but I regained something much more important, myself. Now I have a chance at a true love built on honesty. The past is finally where it belongs, behind me. For the first time in a long while, the future looks wide open and bright, and it's all mine to embrace. The end. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, so subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.